So apparently I'm a filthy fucking liar. At the end of my last video, I mentioned I was going to step away from Deltarune and its fandom for a while for my own peace of mind. And I did! For a whole 5 seconds. Then all of a sudden I got a bunch of people in my ask box asking me about my favorite thing in the world, Spade Score, and it was like a gateway drug because the next thing I knew I was replaying Deltarune Chapter 1 with my best friend as a way to celebrate my exams ending. The special interest never ends! So I'm here now. This video, and the next one in the works, are both to essentially tie up loose ends, get all my pre-chapter 3 thoughts out, before I inevitably get proven wrong by the full release of the next chapters. And we're starting with one of the hardest questions to answer. What is the Dark World? And before that, what even are darkners? No, shut up, listen. Everyone and their mother got up in arms about me and Salt saying darkners aren't literally objects brought to life. Everybody says they're all themed after the stuff in the light world where the fountain was opened. Dancer literally turns into a card, Queen literally calls herself a computer, and all the darkners show up in Castletown if we bring the items to the closet. If we befriend them first. See, what people don't talk about, and that I really should have mentioned in the video, whoops, is that darkners can choose not to come to Castletown with you if you attacked them. Every lost darkner stays lost, even if you bring everything from that room into the closet. That means that, yes, darkners are connected to these objects and can't show up without them, they can also not show up with them. Like they can detach, choose not to play by those rules anymore and leave you because you weren't nice to them. They have lives outside of us. This should be crystal fucking clear by the fact that Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 darkners all know each other despite them being buildings away, but apparently everyone is really into explaining things with things that really aren't plausible. Oh yeah, it makes total sense that a new, really expensive library computer would just be taken to the abandoned classroom in school, or that things from the abandoned classroom would be taken to the library. The fact that the Snowgrave route is as impactful and traumatizing as it is automatically means that the darkners' lives have to mean something. They can't just be in-universe fiction, and they can't just be props with smoke and mirrors to make them look like people. The darkners are alive, they have internal lives, and they have some kind of existence outside of the fountains and outside of the lightners. So why does Queen describe the night as having made their world by opening the fountain? Put on your seatbelts and get out your textbooks, kids. We're going to metaphysics territory.
Wait! We can't stop here. This is bad country.
A bulk of this section is going to be spent trying to explain some very complicated concepts. My original understanding of these ideas was already someone else's chewed up and spat back out understanding them at all, so bear with me as I desperately try to explain it all without sounding completely illegible. In short, metaphysics is the meeting point between philosophy and science. The shit we can't explain even on a purely theoretical level. You ever heard of why is there something instead of nothing? Yeah, that's metaphysics, the fundamental question of it in fact. There's this idea that Kant proposed of transcendental idealism that, in short, dissects the idea that reason is, well, reasonable. That our minds can merely comprehend appearances, that the way we categorize things reveals that there's something that makes something a thing instead of not that thing. Take, for example, a watermelon. How would you describe watermelon? Probably as a fruit, a very sweet one at that. It's watery, it's pink and green, and it's got those annoying seeds, and it's a symbol for a very important cause. But those are just descriptions. Adjectives at worst and vague symbolizations at best. What makes a watermelon what it is? How far back in its evolutionary tree can we go until it's no longer what we'd consider a watermelon? And why? Generally, this idea that our perceptions are surface level then extends into the question of what is that something that we can't see? That pure intrinsic nature of that thing that defines it as standalone, and not like other things that share those same descriptions. And where is it? We certainly can't see it, we can only see its superficial appearance, so what if there's a lot more underneath that we don't see? That's always been there, but we just can't comprehend it. Shit like radio waves, ultraviolet light, math, debatably, they've always been there. Even before we discovered them, the sun's been blasting us with radiation our entire existences, and most of us still don't put on sunscreen. We just can't see it, so it's like it doesn't exist to us. And we're very perception-based creatures. It's basically all we have to go off of for our whole lives. So what if the ordinary things around us are hiding something without even meaning to? The fundamental core of their existences that we're just not attuned enough to notice consciously. What if it's something entirely outside of our realm of understanding altogether? In the real world, this kind of question of metaphysics would probably lead you into a weird mental spiral for a few hours, definitely did for me, but in the context of Deltarune, I think it's a good way to explain what darkners actually are. They aren't objects brought to life, they aren't fully unrelated beings either, they're representations, the things beyond surface level appearances. It's why they can choose to detach themselves from items if they don't like you. They simply go and live on in another object that they're the intrinsic property of. There's plenty of cards and outlets and viruses to choose from. It's why they only show up in the closet with the items. They still need them in order to be properly perceived in the dark world. And it also ties into the themes of the Snowgrave route too. With the deeper, intrinsic thing defining these items being dead, all that's left is the surface level. Everything in the computer lab after the Snowgrave route is just empty husks, including Birdley. His body's still there, but his mind, his intrinsic self, isn't. We've not only taken his life, but we've robbed Noel's of any real meaning. All that's left is to keep up appearances. This theory doesn't really have ramifications on the game as a whole. It's essentially just a way to explain the seemingly unexplainable, the loose threads that just don't make sense when you try to tie them all together. It's why we have darkners that aren't based on objects, but rather less tangible things, like code. It's why some objects turn into people, and others turn into items, and others turn into the environment. It really is just a case-by-case thing of, outside their appearances, what are these things? People? Consumables? Tacky fucking moving ads that make the city a nearly unclearable area for me because of sensory overload? Darkners are people that are metaphysical representations of objects. They can choose to follow you, or they can choose to leave you. Their items are empty without them, but they don't need those items to keep existing. Hence why lost darkners are lost and not dead. Other than the Snowgrave route, they're super dead there. You ever notice how big the darkners are compared to lightners? If you're not nerd like me and like having precise references for characters, you'll notice that the darkners are all disturbingly bigger than the lightners. Asgore, the tallest lightner we have, gets out-heighted by Queen, who is a big deal, true, but she's so much shorter than King. And that's not even mentioning Clover and K-Round and Rules, and if we want to talk regular enemies, the Weirwires are huge, the ambulances are generally just horrendous but also tall, and Viravira-kun, and the Swatchlings. Even the Rudens and the Haithies are all big when compared to the characters they're put in context with. And sure, you could say it's because they're all enemies, so they're meant to be intimidating, but what about Lancer? He's clearly younger than the whole cast, but he's on par with Chris and Ralsei. So what gives? There's a simple fact that their sprites are bigger for the purpose of actually adding more detail to them, unlike the Lightners, who are generally on the same scale as the Undertale characters, who were all proportioned to be bigger than a 9-year-old, which isn't a high bar. Kinda like how Susie is close in height to Toriel, even though Susie is a high schooler and Toriel is an adult woman. The other way to look at it is that there's an in-universe explanation, like Susie being a different kind of monster so she's taller on average. My personal interpretation was always that the darkners are so huge because they're akin to shadows. During the day, your shadow is probably about the same size as you, maybe smaller, maybe bigger, depending on where the sun is, but have you ever had the power go out in your house at night? Your mom grabs a candle, your dad makes sure the breaker's unbusted, and you all sit together in the living room, around the candle, the only source of light. Then your sister starts doing shadow puppets. Her hands are only a little bigger than yours, but the shadows are so big, it looks like the dog could really bite your head off. And then you notice everything has a big shadow now. Your pencils, your erasers, your toys. One piece of paper can block out nearly all the light. Even your own shadow towers over you. Your own shadow. Toby Fox made a tweet a long time ago about how the edge of the shadow is where reality and dreams meet. It's cryptic and came out before Deltarune was out, but I think it's a neat idea nonetheless. This hazy in-between of pure darkness and the light of the day, and what it allows you to see. I think the Dark Worlds, as we see them in the game, aren't the real Dark Worlds. I mean, there's so much light and color, how could they be? Darkness is, well, dark. There's nothing there. Like the person in the coat who's begging to be heard, there's only vague sounds and gestures, but ultimately nothing. Darkness. Lack of something. Lack of light. I think this is just the edge of the shadow. That short bridge between the true abyss and the world of light as we know it. The fountains, though made of darkness, glow and pulse and breathe. The way I see it, the fountains are a tear in reality itself. Instead of the light world leaking into the darkness, it does the opposite, and lets the void seep into the light world, if only for a brief time. All that remains are lightners, beings with enough determination, with enough soul to exist and persevere even in the great expanse of nothingness. That's why the fountains are such a threat. By existing, they bring reality to its knees and blur the line between shadow and light, reality and the unknown, the earth and the void beneath begging to see the surface again. The roaring is less some divine punishment and more just a physical consequence. Darkness turn to stone because they're simultaneously objects and not objects. Light is snuffed out completely as the infinite nothing, the true lack, seeps in and blocks out even something as overwhelming and ever-present as the sun. And lightners, even with their determination, cannot exist in a world of nothing. At least, not while staying sane. I think dark worlds are an altered state of reality. They represent fiction in metaphor only, because the Lightner characters, our stand-ins, are immersing themselves in a reality not their own. It is real, in the sense that the emotions and events that are happening weren't just made up by somebody, but they're unreal in the sense that there's no tangible evidence that it happened once it's over, like Aurora Borealis or a solar eclipse. All you have are your memories, your feelings, and if you didn't have anyone next to you to tell you it really did happen, you probably wouldn't believe it either. In complete darkness, even small glimmers of light can paint vivid pictures from the shadows cast by objects around it. Like droplets of water, the darkness reflect real things and make them bigger, brighter, magical, but they can't do that without a source of light. They're autonomous beings, they have lives and hopes and dreams, but they need the light in order to exist. To be perceived for them is to exist, because without it they're only void, lack. They can't live without the light in a way that really matters. And the game itself is asking us, what of Chris, then? What of their unreality? The world of the game doesn't exist unless we perceive it, so doesn't that make Chris and Susie darkners in a way too? What does it mean for Chris to resist our control? What does it mean for darkners to resist the light's will? The night is trying to escape something. Chris and Susie are using the fountains as escapism, but what is that doing to the people around them? To the world around them? Is Deltarune our fountain? Letting us jump into another world, perceive it, and bring it into existence, doing both harm and good to the people inside that have their own lives without us, in order for us to escape our world for just a little while? And is the right thing to do, ultimately, to close it?